Acting Captain's Log, March 31st, 2016. Hey everyone, so if you haven't heard already, recently Hans Zimmer has said that he's done scoring superhero films. He said specifically superhero films. It's a very short segment in a longer interview, which I recommend reading. Not reading, but watching. It's in a video form. I have it in the link in the description below, but it's a really good interview. It's a really interesting interview. If you don't know a lot about Hans Zimmer, he's actually a very interesting guy. He's got a very interesting family history, a really interesting scholarly history. He's a very fun guy to listen to in interviews because he always feels very personal. But he said in this interview that I've linked to that he's done scoring superhero films. And the big thing he said is that he worked with Christopher Nolan on Batman Begins 12 years ago. And for us, the viewer, it's only 3 movies, but for him, it was like 11 years of his life. So there was a lot of work that went into that. In between those movies, you had Inception, you had Interstellar afterwards. He worked with Junkie XL for Batman vs. Superman. He did The Amazing Spider-Man. Or The Amazing Spider-Man 2, that is. I'm not sure if he did the first one. No, I think he did only the second one. But point being, he's done lots of superhero films, and he's done them all very close together, and he spent a lot of his life, at least in the mid to late 2000s, dealing with these types of characters. And so he talks about this idea that it's tough to pin down the language of the music when you do so much of it. It's interesting that his music always felt varied. As much as I didn't like Batman vs. Superman, and as much as I felt the score was badly placed and in certain areas generic, it was distinct from everything else he's done. I know a lot of people don't like The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I like it more than most people. It's not a great movie. It's a fun movie, I think. But his score for that I thought was actually really good. I like his electro theme quite a bit, and I like that it's about getting inside the character's head, which is something I'll talk about in a minute. His Dark Knight themes, his Dark Knight trilogy scores were fantastic. As much as I don't like Interstellar, his score for that was fantastic. His score for Inception was really good. He's got a very specific style, and so I think Inception might be the weakest of the ones I mentioned, not because it's bad, but because it feels very derivative of the films he was doing around that period. But he's got a very particular voice, he's got a very particular style, and part of what I like about his scores over most of the other ones we get for superhero films is that it's not about putting you into the situation as much as it's about ramping you up scene to scene and getting you emotionally there. It's not like, say, the score for something like Alan Silvestri when he did, I think he's the one who did not Winter Soldier, he's the one who did Captain America the First Avenger. Part of his score for that was about building the world. The way he used his music, the way a lot of composers use music, is to try and get us into the universe, to try and get us into the right mood for the kind of world we're walking into. There's a great video essay by the Nerd Writer about the use of scores in Lord of the Rings and how it's a parallel of where the characters are, what the state of the world is, what the optimistic or pessimistic outlook of the movie is at that point, that the score is trying to reflect in the audience just by listening. And Zimmer doesn't necessarily do that. He doesn't build a world with his scores. He sucks you into a movie emotionally. The thing all about the Dark Knight score that I love the most, and why I think it's probably his best, he did The Lion King too, that's a really good score. The reason I think the Dark Knight is his best score is because that score was a heartbeat. That score was almost literally parallel to how your heart would ramp in and out depending on what scene you were in. That's part of why that movie works so well and why it's so effectively edited, is because of that music, of being able to go from scene to scene, being able to be in places where there's just conversation and you hear like a soft ambient noise, which would just be the way your heart was in that situation. And as you start to notice the tension building, you start to notice your heart pumping, you notice the music ramping up in succession with it. And it's just brilliantly done. It's an absolutely great score. And he's really good at that. He did that with the electro music. He did it so it was about hearing the voices in Electro's head. And I know a lot of people didn't like that, but I thought it was a really interesting experimental choice, and I liked the way he handled it. In Batman vs. Superman, even though I don't particularly like that score, I do like how he tried to make it distinct from The Dark Knight, and I do like that he was really trying, as he says, to bring a new language to it. And I completely understand why he's not doing superhero films anymore, because he's right. As much as he was able to innovate music through the Dark Knight trilogy, there's only so much you can do, right? Like, he had Junkie XL help him out with Batman vs. Superman, and that added a different kind of flavor to it than the Nolan films. But I think the Nolan films still have a superior score. I think the Nolan films were a different kind of passion project for him than this movie was. And I respect him for not continuing to do it if he gets exhausted by it. Because like he says, he's been doing this consistently for 11 years. It's difficult to try and be unique when all you're doing is building a score around the same type of characters. Now, obviously, Spider-Man is different from Batman, who's different from Superman, who's different from Wonder Woman, who's different from anything in Interstellar, who's different from anything in Inception. So there is a range there. The issue is, superheroes very traditionally deal with the same sorts of themes in different ways. And the score has to be reflective of not only the themes, but the character's personality. And so Zimmer can innovate very well with the personality of the characters since he's not doing the world-building scores. At the same time, there's only so much you can do with that if you don't get inside the character's head well enough. If for example, let's just say Hans Zimmer was not a fan of the Batman character, but still did a really good score. He did it out of really great inspiration in that moment. If you keep making him do that, then after a while he's going to get exhausted because he can't necessarily get into every character's head. If Hans Zimmer is, say we get to him, let's just pretend he was doing the Justice League movie. If he's not a fan of Flash and he's trying to do his score, his mental score thing, it might be more difficult to do it with Flash. I think it's completely understandable. He's got a very particular skill set. It's a really good skill set, but I could see how he could burn out, especially considering how much he's done already. So some people are saying this is bad news. Some people are saying this is sad news. I think I'm perfectly okay with it. I still don't think it was a good decision to make him do the next Batman score with Junkie XL right after he got off the Dark Knight trilogy. Not because I didn't trust him to put out a good score, but because it's good to innovate. It's good to get different blood into the stream with these kinds of movies. And he just spent so much time with Batman, and I'm pretty sure that most of the reason he's done with this is because he spent so much time with one character, regardless of the quality of his music. So I'm happy he's moving on. He's not retiring. He's retiring from superhero movies. So I'm sure you'll see him score some other movie in the near future. I don't know if we've announced who's scoring Dunkirk for Christopher Nolan, but I imagine it's going to be Hans Zimmer. So yeah, I'm glad he's getting out of the superhero game. I'm glad he's still staying in the game though. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said. If you had to pick a superhero for Hans Zimmer to score, even though he's retiring now, do you think there's a character he would have been perfect for before he retired from the superhero business? Because especially in retrospect, it's tough to answer that question, but I think he was really perfect for Batman. I mean, I know a lot of people say that the Elfman music from '89 was never going to get topped, but for the version of Batman we had in the Nolan films, I thought he was absolutely perfect to score those movies. But if there was a superhero you wanted him to try out one more time before he went away, who would it be? Thanks everybody for watching, and that concludes today's Acting Captain's Log.